Hello everyone and welcome to the second annual Triple Neon Movie Awards.
Thank you.
For those unaware, this show is basically an excuse for me to discuss all the great films I happened to watch last year, meaning the nominees here aren't going to exclusively be 2023 releases, they can be literally anything I watched in the year gone by. Apparently, I watched 116 movies in 2023, if you ignore rewatches, which is quite a bit more than last year. So this second annual will be extra competitive and extra controversial. There's even some new categories to get excited about, and of course, if you're not interested in a certain category, then you can just skip to the next one. Either way, I think we should just jump into it with the first award. The first nominee I have is Across the Spider-Verse. After Into the Spider-Verse came out in 2018, I didn't think animation could get any more creative, revolutionary, or beautiful. But in retrospect, it really does feel like that first movie was just testing the waters, because the amount of style blending and experimentation found here is unbelievable. The abstract expressionism of Gwen's world and everything to do with the spot were probably the things I was most impressed by. Nominee 2 is Chungking Express. This Hong Kong crime romance film creates such an amazing, moody, dreamlike feel, with its use of hypnotizing slow motion and a beautifully vibrant color palette created by the city lights. Nominee 3 is Days of Heaven. This is a classic film that I wasn't too hot on, to be honest, but it undeniably has some stunning cinematography. I mean, when you inconvenience everyone by exclusively shooting your movie at golden hour, you deserve a nomination in this category. The next pick is kind of offbeat. I went for Raising Arizona. Comedy is one of those film genres where stylized cinematography is very uncommon, because it's just so writing and acting focused, you know? But Raising Arizona does such a good job at conveying the kooky tone of its world visually, both through mise-en-scène and camera. And the final nominee here is Suspiria. This movie kind of subverts all the visual cliches of horror and figures out how to scare you through quite bizarre set design and a very saturated, lurid color palette. I've never really seen anything like it before. And the winner is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Very well deserved. Speaking of Across the Spider-Verse, it's nominated here again, and I'm counting its Metro Boomin soundtrack and its experimental Daniel Pemberton score as one thing. I was very impressed by how seamlessly the movie implemented the two together. Babylon has a beautiful jazz score that can be grand, playful, and emotional all in one. According to Spotify, Voodoo Mama was my 6th most listened to song in 2023, which shows just how much I love this soundtrack. Shout out Justin Hurwitz. Ludwig Göransson's Oppenheimer score is truly a marvel. The film, especially in the first hour, has quite a quick tempo with lots of short scenes and a lot of different moments being intercut with each other, and this score kind of felt like the tempo underneath it all, which propelled it forward and maintained its cohesion. My 4th nominee is John Williams' classic 1978 Superman score. I think my Superman bias may be showing here, but honestly I don't think there's a single superhero film score that quite has the punch of this one. And finally, Suspiria gets another nomination because that soundtrack by Goblin manages to be eerie and unsettling in all the best ways. And the winner is Across the Spider-Verse for its 2nd award tonight. Of course, every nominee is great, but this one in particular just felt very envelope pushing. And I'm quite shocked it didn't even get a nomination at the Oscars, but Dial of Destiny did. My first nominee is the under pressure scene from After Sun. For those unaware, this movie is about an adult woman named Sophie reflecting on the last holiday she had with her father before he killed himself. Without giving too much away, this under pressure scene is sort of the climax of the movie where the present day scenes and the flashback scenes connect, and the emotional turmoil Sophie feels is visualized over a dance scene. It's very powerful, much like the I'm Just Ken scene from Barbie, only Ken's scene is arguably a little less heavy. Ken's arc is the ultimate symbol for male insecurity, and this power ballad, along with the Ken War and the Dream Ballet aesthetic, makes for the perfect climax. Even though arguably Oppenheimer's most iconic scene is the Trinity test, I personally think the scene right after it, where Oppenheimer addresses the public, is my favorite of that film. It's just a perfect microcosm of Oppenheimer's guilt, as well as the whole some people laughed, some people cried, most people were silent idea. It's just very powerful and features some amazing practical effects. One of my favorite films I watched this year was Martin Scorsese's underrated masterpiece, Silence. In that film, there's a very powerful scene where Andrew Garfield, who plays a Catholic priest, is given the choice of either giving up his faith or letting people die. And without revealing too much, the decision that he makes sort of ties the whole film together and is a great commentary on Christianity and ego. Finally, I want to nominate the Beastie Boys scene from Guardians of the Galaxy 3. It's definitely the coolest fight scene of the entire MCU, and maybe my favorite fight scene of the year. The John Wick 4 top-down scene is also amazing, but I have kind of a Guardians of the Galaxy bias, so that's the one that actually gets a nomination. And the winner is... I can't really decide. I'm just gonna choose one people will be mad about. Let's go with I'm Just Ken. New category alert, new category alert. Last year I didn't have this award because I barely watched any new releases, but in 2023 I actually went to the cinema a decent amount, so I feel like having this award is justified. However, there are plenty of great movies from this year that I have not seen yet, so I'm sorry that they could not get a nomination. Okay, nominee 1 is Barbie. I thought it was extremely imaginative and extremely funny, an instant classic for me. Nominee 2 is Guardians 3. This was the perfect send-off to my favorite trilogy. I hope no Lord of the Rings or Star Wars fans get upset at me for saying that. Nominee 3 is Oppenheimer. I think it's without a doubt the most important film of Nolan's career, and spoiler alert, you will be hearing more about it in this video. Nominee 4 is May December, an amazing melodrama about actors exploiting the traumas of real people, which manages to balance camp and painfully unsettling subject matter magnificently. I can't believe it's been so snubbed this year at the major award shows. And finally, nominee 5 is Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning. This is definitely a movie you can pick apart, but when you watch it for the first time in the cinema, it feels like the greatest thing you've ever seen. And the winner is Oppenheimer. Hooray! Last year I had a running joke that Nolan kept getting nominated for awards but never winning them. It wasn't personal and it wasn't on purpose, I just made the observation and leaned into the joke of it. But now he finally won one, yay! I'm sure he is overjoyed and definitely knows who I am. Last year I only did Best Performance, but this year I split it into Best Actor and Actress. Some would argue that the Triple Neo Movie Awards are going backwards in progressiveness, but I just did that so I can show a bit more love, because just talking about 5 actors like last year is not enough. Dog Day Afternoon was the first time I've ever watched Al Pacino in a leading role. I don't know why it took so long, but it was a real revelation for me. I did not expect him to be as charismatic and funny and vulnerable as he was. It's really his performance that elevates the film from good to masterpiece, and he basically instantly became a top 5 favorite actor of mine right after this. Tom Cruise in Magnolia is just hilarious.
Respect the cock.
And it's quite fascinating being reminded that guys like this have existed in all eras of history and not just the social media era. Tom Cruise gets a lot of love nowadays for being like the last true movie star, and while yes, his stunts and passion for filmmaking is unbelievable, I really feel like it's the work he did in the 80s, 90s and early 2000s that cements him as one of the greatest actors of all time. And I think a lot of younger, more modern audiences have no idea who Frank T.J. Mackey is, and it's a travesty. Leandro Firmino in City of God is one of the most disturbing villains ever put to screen, and a great window into how a person's circumstance can turn them into somebody so corrupt. City of God is a beloved movie, but I rarely hear people actually single out his performance, despite how the whole film kind of hinges on it. Everyone under the sun knows how good Ryan Gosling is in Barbie. I've known since The Nice Guys that Ryan is one of the funniest actors working today, and I'm so glad he got a mainstream comedy to flutter his feathers in. And of course, Cillian Murphy in Oppenheimer, who is also the winner of this award. Sorry for the early reveal, but it was just obvious. When you carry a movie like that on your back for the whole runtime, winning Best Actor is inevitable. Lily Gladstone in Killers of the Flower Moon is a performance that really just breaks your heart, and I hope she wins at these upcoming Oscars. Rosamund Pike in Gone Girl is the perfect psychopath. She brings a great balance of being cold and calculating, while also portraying the underlying frustration that makes her character who she is. She nailed that so much so that lots of people even root for her in this movie. Even though Jackie isn't necessarily a movie I loved, I thought it was a little tedious and shallow, Natalie Portman just carries that film so much that all you can do is watch in awe at how a performance like that is even achievable. Natalie Portman also gets another nomination for May December. Most award shows don't allow stars to be nominated multiple times for one category, but I think it's funny if I start doing that here. The aspects of a performance which stand out the most to me from this film are the way she mirrors Julianne Moore's character, the disturbingness of her dialogue to Charles Melton after their affair, and of course the punchline of how garbage and exploitative her character's final performance is. My last nomination goes to Quvenzhané Wallis in Beasts of a Southern Wild. It's quite rare for child actors to not take you out of a movie because of how cheesy their performances are, and it's even more rare for a child actor to be the best part of a movie. So Quvenzhané deserves this, and the winner is Natalie Portman for Jackie. The odds seem to be in her favor. This is not an award for best directing, it's an award for which director had the biggest impact on me this year. 2023 was the first ever time I watched anything by Michael Mann, and apparently the 2 films I watched of his aren't even considered his best, but the precision and swagger he seems to bring to his movies is hard not to love. And in particular, I was fascinated by the way he modernized Miami Vice into this gritty tragedy, which has some of the most unique digital cinematography I've ever seen. Guys, I promise you, I do not identify as a Nolan head, but the movies I watched from him this year here are my two favorite Nolan movies, so it would be criminal not to give him a nomination. I feel like Memento is the most flawless Nolan-y Nolan movie, and then Oppenheimer was where he proved that he was capable of stuff quite different from the persona he kind of built for himself over his career. Sidney Lumet, like Michael Mann, was a director I kind of discovered this year. Obviously, 12 Angry Men is a classic. I've already raved about Dog Day Afternoon a bit. I think it's so much fun, and it takes a strangely sweet 180 around its midpoint, which elevates the movie so much. But also, Failsafe, one of his lesser known movies, actually brought me to tears because it handles its heavy subject matter so well. The film is sort of a critique on how the systems that were in place during the Cold War were broken and could have easily led to nuclear destruction. It's sort of like Dr. Strangelove, but played straight. I highly recommend. Steven Spielberg is one of the first filmmakers anyone ever learns about, but once people actually start getting into movies, they kind of reject him and forget about him, but eventually everyone wraps back around and realizes he's one of the best, if not the best, to ever do it. And this year was the year when I really started appreciating him, even if the movies of his I saw weren't necessarily his best, except Fabelmans, which I adored. And finally, Billy Wilder. Both Some Like It Hot and The Apartment are some of the sharpest comedies ever written. What a guy. And the winner is Sidney Lumet. I was really stuck between him and Spielberg, but because Lumet really burst onto the scene for me, and because Spielberg is likely to get nominated more in the future, I felt Sidney deserved to take this one home. This year, we have some amazing entries in this category, starting with Ben Affleck's Daredevil. You know, for the first 20 minutes or so, I was actually intrigued by this film, because I was post-ironically into its leather-wrapped gothicism. Superhero movies now are so samey that I'd honestly rather watch weird garbage like this than the snooze fests pumped out on Disney+. However, literally nothing happens in this movie. I remember randomly pausing it and seeing that the film was 60% over, despite me thinking it hadn't even really started. And this film has one of my biggest pet peeves ever, which is an overuse of shot reverse shot close-ups. It just makes me feel really claustrophobic, and it's not intentional at all. Next is Elektra, the companion film to Daredevil, which lacks any of the intrigue of the original. This is just a painful, awkward, nonsensical movie that just never seems to end. The standout lowlight for me is that final bedsheet battle, which I'm actually scared to show because I'm worried that over-editing of it will trigger an epileptic fit in someone who watches this. Five Nights at Freddy's is also nominated here, which I know a lot of people will be upset about, but I just found it really boring, to be honest. It was never scary, the mystery it was building never intrigued me, and all of the characters felt so wooden. I actually took my glasses off in the cinema and half tried to nap for a good chunk of it, and what adds fuel to the fire is that I accidentally bought tickets to it twice and couldn't get a refund, which sucked. Matthew Lillard deserves so much better than this movie. Kissing Booth kind of had to be on this nominees list because it's just one of those classic terrible movies. However, I watched this with a few friends and I actually had a great time laughing at it, so the pain that people usually have watching this, I didn't really have. Stuck Together is a French comedy movie about COVID, which I was forced to watch in French class, and it is so unfunny that I actually couldn't look at the screen because it was making me cringe too much. And the winner is Elektra, probably the worst movie I've ever seen. We're finally at the climax of the show, and strangely Best Picture is actually kind of hard to write for because it's just so obvious why these movies are great. It feels redundant explaining why they're nominated. Like for example, nominee 1, 12 Angry Men, probably one of the most airtight movies ever made, is timeless and has some of the most striking compositions ever put to screen, despite being shot all in one location, like come on. Number 2 is City of God. For those unaware, this is a Brazilian film that takes place over 15 years about a bunch of interconnected characters either trying to escape or dominate the crime world within the favelas they grew up in. This is one of those movies where every aspect of it is operating at the highest level, and you just cannot believe things like this exist. The next nominee is Oliver Stone's 3-hour political thriller, JFK. It's a movie that explores all the conspiracy around JFK's death, and whether the film manipulates and sensationalizes the subject matter or not, it was without a doubt the most hooked I've ever been with a film of this length. Police Story is kind of the black sheep within this category, but probably the one I feel closest to. This is an 80s action comedy by Jackie Chan, where it's just Jackie doing some of his best stunts and some of his best comedy. Everything is insanely choreographed and done for real, and there's nothing else like it. Finally, Magnolia, a film about 9 interconnected storylines which all focus in some way on the theme of forgiveness, reconciliation, self-improvement, that sort of thing. Despite it being very long, it's one of the most exhilarating movie experiences out there, and PTA is insane for making it at just 28 years old. And the winner is City of God. If you look at my all-time favorites list on Letterboxd, I actually have Police Story above City of God just because of personal love. But at the end of the day, this category is called Best Picture, and hands down City of God was the best picture I saw this year. One more bonus award tonight. It's Best Snubbed. This is a shout out to the great movies I watched this year that unfortunately didn't even get mentioned in a passing thought in this video. The nominees are The Lighthouse, Pan's Labyrinth, Paris, Texas, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, but the winner is Barry Lyndon. I have no idea how it didn't even get nominated for anything. Oh yeah, also as a closing thought, people have requested for me to give TV awards, but I only watched one show this year, so this is what that award show would have looked like, which to be honest isn't actually that bad, because to the untrained eye, this just looks like the winners of this year's Emmys. Anyways, thanks for watching, goodbye.